Time is a resource. A currency that's finite and precious. The older we get, the harder it becomes to invest substantial amounts of it into a single activity. As a teenager, I spent the majority of my time playing video games. I poured hours upon hours of my life into whatever PC game I had available to me at the time, from management sims to online shooters. My time was bountiful. What was the harm in investing the majority of it into Team Fortress 2? Nothing. I was 15 and I was going to live forever. If time was currency, then I was a billionaire. As an adult, things couldn't be more different. After wrapping up a 7-hour workday, a chunk of my evening is then spent preparing dinner, completing chores, and catching up with my partner. If I'm not exhausted from this undoubtedly familiar series of tiny rituals, I may spend a very small amount of time playing a game before bed. Studies suggest that, on average, adults have around 5 hours of free time per day. 5 measly hours to spend grabbing dinner with a friend, catching up on our favourite TV shows, or playing a video game. Now, video games have always been notorious time sinks, but in the modern era it can feel like they demand our attention more than ever. These days, everything from multiplayer shooters to single-player adventures include live service elements, a popular concept that sees developers adding new content and features to existing games in order to provide players with a near infinite amount of things to see and do. With such limited free time available to us, how are we meant to fit more than one game into our schedules? How much time would it take to become a pro at Fortnite, to visit every planet in Destiny 2, to collect every waifu in Genshin Impact, or to create a popular game in Roblox? Would it be possible to achieve these goals without sacrificing the essential parts of our daily routines that keep us fed, watered, and surrounded by loved ones? This is the question behind Inventory Space, a new series here at Rock Paper Shotgun, where both myself and my colleague Ed Thorne will spend 4 weeks playing a huge live service game to discover how much space it takes up in our lives. How much time do you need to invest to see everything it has to offer? And is it even worth doing so in the first place? If my day was an inventory, how many free slots would a game of this size take up? There are few games as content-rich or prestigious as World of Warcraft. Blizzard's massively multiplayer online role-playing game wasn't the first MMORPG on the market, but it was certainly the biggest. Released in 2004 for both PC and Mac, World of Warcraft launched right at the point where online multiplayer games were beginning to gain momentum, quickly establishing itself as a bona fide cultural phenomenon. It's hard to understate just how popular WoW was back in the mid-2000s. Few games offered a world as expansive or as compelling as Azeroth, allowing players to explore a huge fantasy realm in a completely seamless and organic way. Like many MMOs that came before it, World of Warcraft wasn't just a game. For many, it was a tangible space where strangers became friends, their adventures through these dangerous lands forging a common bond that could last a lifetime. In the 18 years since its launch, World of Warcraft has received 8 expansion packs that have each added additional content to the game, such as extra playable classes, huge locations, and fresh mechanics. WoW was often imitated but never replaced, its competitors unable to match the game's rich lore and cutting-edge technology. In 2022, MMORPGs are no longer the juggernauts they once were a decade ago. As the general gaming populace began to turn their attention to console-based multiplayer titles such as Call of Duty, the genre's relevance began to wane. And yet, despite this, WoW remained fiercely singular and impressively popular, even in the face of an ever-changing multiplayer landscape. WoW may not have the pull of a Fortnite or a Warzone these days, but this aging titan remains as contemporary as possible despite its competition. It felt like picking World of Warcraft as the first game to cover for this project was the most obvious choice. WoW, more than any other game I can think of, is a beast that feeds on time. I've known far too many people in my life who speak of their days playing WoW with both reverence and dismay. Ask them about their time in Azeroth and you'll see a glimmer of nostalgia give way to a sort of deep sadness, a longing for a time in their lives that no longer exists. Some people spent years playing this game. The affection they hold for it is immeasurable, and it's precisely why they've sworn to never play it ever again. Is it possible to forge a bond this strong with a game of this scope by consuming it in such a casual way? We were determined to find out. Okay. I'll just ask you some questions. We'll have a chat.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, how are you feeling about it? Before we began, we decided to jump on a Discord call to lay down some ground rules. Ed and I would play World of Warcraft for 4 weeks. We were only allowed to play the game in a casual way. That means no playing it during work hours, no turning down plans we would normally say yes to in favour of playing WoW instead, no forcing ourselves to play in a way that was unusual to our regular adult routines. November felt like a pretty regular month for us in terms of plans. We weren't going on any holidays, and our work schedules felt lighter than they had been for the rest of the year. We had, for all intents and purposes, a very average month ahead of us. I'm seeing friends, family, seeing Kendrick Lamar tomorrow. Very excited for that. It'd be very funny if I rush home from seeing Kendrick live to grind a little bit in World of Warcraft.
Got the occasional, seeing friends, or I play a lot of badminton and stuff, so I've got matches on here and there, but most weekends right now it's pretty free.
All that was left to do before we took our first tentative steps into Azeroth was to decide what our goals were for the project. We came up with 3. We want to try and hit the level cap of 60, we want to take part in a raid, and we also want to try and finish the campaign, or at least as much of the campaign that's available to us. The new campaign, Dragonflight, comes out hopefully the day this video goes live. In our minds, these goals represented features that are synonymous with World of Warcraft. Can you even mention WoW without conjuring up images of huge raids, level caps? Exactly. I was a bit, optimistic about how achievable these all were. Thankfully, Ed, as always, was a voice of reason.
I think we'll achieve level 60. I think we'll hit this level cap. The raid is a little bit... I don't know if we'll do. I would love to. I think that would be amazing to do. I've never done a raid in WoW. I just think that's, we'll have to hit level 60. And from my understanding, you kind of have to have a good gear. So we'll kind of have to grind to get that gear first, which will take more time. We'll have to find a group to party up with. Just a lot of the admin needs to be done to kind of get the raid going.
Probably worth mentioning that the raid goal was something I had suggested. You see, I've never actually played World of Warcraft before. It feels like an odd thing as well to even admit that when I work for a PC gaming website. Ed, on the other hand, has a very different relationship with the game.
WoW was such like a massive part of my teenage years. I'm intrigued to see how I respond to all of this. So I think there's a lot of underlying feelings to WoW.
With all that cleared up, I had one last question for my good friend Ed. How do you feel about being forced to hang out with me weekly for the best part of a month? I'm assuming you're drafting your resignation letter as we speak.
Yeah.
Okay, that one doesn't count. But this final question was potentially the most revealing. What do you want to achieve from this experience? What are you hoping to find during this journey? I don't know why I use that word.
Oh, yes. It's very deep question, this. I just have so many fond memories of it. I'm just looking forward to being back, and I'm hoping that, in booting up the game and starting out in whatever we do, will bring back those same emotions.
So, just the minor hope that playing WoW would allow Ed to relive a formative experience from his youth. No pressure. And with that, we were off. Clients were booted up and a realm was selected. Now it was time for our first truly important decision. What race and class should we pick? Now, I may be a WoW newbie, but that doesn't mean I'm not a proud Warcraft nerd. Warcraft 3 was a favourite of mine back in the day, so I still have some affection for this series and its world. I always loved the Night Elf campaign back in the day, those little wisps. Cracking, so it felt only right to choose my beloved pointy-eared pals once more. I often play as a mage in other fantasy RPGs, and I also hate change, so it only felt right to imbue my newly birthed elf with the power of sorcery. I named her Sharald because I'm only capable of making one joke repeatedly. Ed, on the other hand, created a big panda lad called, brilliantly, Edders. Edders was a shaman, and I immediately regretted my decision to play as a bog-standard elf when this was an option the whole time. Still, what a moment! Here was Sharald, my very first character. The tapestry of her life lay bare before my eyes. What adventures awaited her within the Eastern Kingdoms? In 4 short weeks, who would Sharald become? Tentatively, and with great excitement, I finally entered the World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft begins, as fantasy adventures so often do, on a boat. After a very brief combat tutorial, Ed and I found ourselves shipwrecked on a beautiful island. Here, the game introduced us to the core facets of WoW. Quests were handed to us by NPCs. They tasked us with killing a certain number of enemies or clicking on a couple of objects before returning to them to receive our rewards. Combat involved, for me anyway as a mage, channeling spells before unleashing them upon my enemies. Everything felt a touch old-fashioned, but what else did we expect? WoW may have received countless quality of life improvements over the years, but this is still an MMORPG. An 18-year-old one at that. Initially, there was something quite pleasant about its rough edges and slow-paced activities. And I mean, come on, I was finally playing WoW! Actually playing it, not just experiencing it secondhand through the stories my friends would share with me when I was at secondary school. I'd literally, which is quite sad to admit, dreamed of this day, and it was finally happening. Those first few hours were pure magic. We killed murlocs. We made a boar, like, really big. We disguised ourselves as an ogre. We killed some harpies. I realised that, due to various cross-promotions I had unwillingly been a part of, I had a bunch of weird collectibles already unlocked, such as this adorable little fella. Look, it's baby Winston Overwatch, from the video game Overwatch. What a treat! We shortly bid our farewells and agreed that things had gotten off to a good start. We had arrived in World of Warcraft, and we couldn't be happier about it. The next day, after cooking dinner and watching a bit of TV with my partner, I quite fancied jumping back on for a few hours before bed. It's a good sign, isn't it? After wrapping up the final quest on the tutorial island, Sharald mounted a griffin before flying off into the horizon with a group of Alliance soldiers. Within moments, I had landed in Stormwind, the capital city of the Eastern Kingdoms, and a location I recognised from obsessively reading PC Gamer back in the late 2000s. In a strange way, it kind of felt like returning home. The game was very keen to immediately grab me by the hand and show me around this bustling hub of activity. I learned how to ride a horse, I was taught some powerful spells by a trainer that was devoted to helping players of my specific class. I was led into the court of the king himself, ascending the grand stone stairs towards his keep that sat atop the city like a crown. I was so in awe of the journey I had taken so far, I barely paid attention to what was being said to me. Something about a quest. Yeah, whatever, Your Majesty. What do you want me to do? Kill a couple of rats? Bring back their candles? Don't worry about it, pal. Give me 10 minutes. I'll have those back to you in, I don't know, what do you say around here? 2 shakes of a murloc's tail? Just let me admire your cool house for a bit. Before I even had time to ask if I could nip for a quick wee before I head out, the game threw me aboard another ship. One very long loading screen later, I was shown a cutscene that told me about something. This woman's complicated relationship with her mother, and on a broader scale, the kingdom she once called home, I guess. Now, I know, as a huge Warcraft 3 liker, that this is Jaina Proudmoore, but WoW didn't seem especially keen to tell me this. No matter, I'm sure things will get back on track soon, right? Wrong. What followed was a series of events that were confusing and, to be perfectly honest, tedious. The game had dragged me, against my will, from the majestic walls of Stormwind to the dreary docks of Borealis. I was here, for reasons I couldn't decipher, and tasked with doing something for someone so we could do a thing that would cause stuff to happen as a result. With no context, these old-school quests lost a lot of their shine. Killing guards to free urchins wasn't as rewarding as I was expecting. I mean, where the fuck was I? Why was it raining so much? Why was it so cloudy? A quick Google offered me some much-needed insight. I was on the island of Kultiris, a location featured in the game's Battle for Azeroth expansion. WoW, it turns out, had funneled me into a storyline featured in the game's 7th expansion pack, without giving me a single piece of context. In the pit of my stomach, a small feeling of disappointment began to form.
It's just not that engaging to me anymore. It's just a lot of like pressing the same buttons a lot, isn't it?
A week after we first played together, Ed and I reunited to see if adventuring as a duo would improve our time on Drizzle Island somewhat. Ed had spent the week picking away at the game's opening hours, and like me, had found himself forced to Kultiris without any say in the matter. For Ed, the biggest difference from the last time he played was the clear lack of player choice. Where was the sense of adventure? By placing us in the middle of a story that was 10 years in the making, how were we meant to feel connected to our characters and their journey? Things were troubling, but we remained hopeful. Maybe killing some sirens together would brighten our spirits despite this dreary atmosphere. For the next 4 hours, Ed and I collected items, killed monsters, and completed quests. XP was dished out like sweets on Halloween, our characters advancing multiple levels every 20 minutes or so. Every so often, we'd separate for a spell, focusing on different quests before joining up again to tackle a more difficult one together. We stole eggs from nests and kicked the tails off raccoons. The conversation quickly took a detour from what we were actually doing to literally anything else. We talked about, food subscription boxes.
Yeah, we get the Gusto box, where you put in like 4 meals and they just send you everything all weighed out and...
Oh, is it kind of like HelloFresh?
Yeah, literally the same as HelloFresh, yeah.
The recently released Sonic Frontiers.
Because I've never really been into Sonic games. And the fact the whole thing of him going really fast, I feel like that just breeds impatience.
And as we became quickly overwhelmed by tedium, we decided to run a marathon together for reasons I can no longer remember.
I'd like to, next year, I'm sort of thinking about doing a half marathon.
There's the always the Great North Run, if you wanted to do a marathon.
Yeah, one day. It'd be interesting if we could sync up somehow.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, do it together. Yeah, that'd be good.
Try it together. Although, yeah, I suppose we'd have to... It's just a shame we don't live closer, because obviously we could train together, but we'd have to kind of train on our lonesome and then just meet for that day or whatever and just go run.
This has the energy of being drunk on a night out and agreeing to someone you've only known for 2 hours that you're definitely going to come to their wedding.
Yeah,
I can't
so
explain
true.
it, but we're playing World of Warcraft on a Thursday night.
We just decided to do Great North Run in 2024 or whatever. What? Oh my god.
This was perhaps the most excited we'd been all evening, other than the moment I discovered I had, at some point, unlocked a gore-smeared catapult as a mount.
You can make sure you add it to your hotbar, my Christ.
I can't remember the last time I went for a walk, never mind a run, yet here I was making plans to do a fucking marathon in 2024. Yeah, things were getting pretty desperate pretty quickly. We were having a nice time catching up, don't get me wrong, but we had an equally nice time playing battleships together a few weeks ago while waiting in Overwatch 2's logging queue. WoW was merely facilitating the social interaction. It wasn't offering anything in the way of enjoyment or engagement outside of that. Troubled, we began to question what we were missing here. When had that sense of excitement and wonder evaporated? When did the quests begin to feel so dry? When had combat devolved into simply watching a progress bar increase repeatedly until either my enemy died or I did? Things were grim. This wasn't the World of Warcraft experience either of us had envisaged, and we were unsure what to do to counteract this quick descent into boredom. So we decided it was time to call in some experts.
We played last Thursday night for 3-4 hours.
Yes, yeah.
I think it would be reasonable to say that we were bored as shit.
Oh yeah?
So,
What did you do?
So, this is what we're talking
The morning after our disappointing play session, I put a call out on our company Slack asking if anyone with experience playing World of Warcraft would be interested in talking to us about the reasons why the game appealed to them. Immediately, and I'm talking literal minutes here, we got 2 responses. This is Alex and Connor. Alex is a video producer for our parent company ReadPop, while Connor is a staff writer for our multi-platform rival VG247. Alex has been playing World of Warcraft since the summer of 2008, while Connor began his adventures a few years later in 2015. Alex has played a lot of World of Warcraft over the last 14 years. At the beginning of the Shadowlands expansion, he was in the top 100 for his class. His main character has over 450 days of playtime, and his alts aren't too far behind. We had struck gold in our quest to discover a true WoW master. After explaining to Alex what we had experienced so far as new players, he wasn't exactly surprised to hear that we were struggling.
They gave us the new player experience and they was like, go and try it out. There's a new starter zone. Go and see what you think.
Okay.
And I was like, I'll go and try it out. I'll have a look. And I was like, oh, this new starting zone's quite nice. The quests, it shows you how the modern quest system works versus the old quest system for the new starter zones. It was absolutely lovely. I finished that and then it threw me into the beginning of the expansion that we'd just done. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. Does that mean you've thrown the story out the window? So a new player who has no idea of the game up until now, which in terms of an ongoing online story-driven MMO, is not going to know the history of how we've got where we are. And I just thought that's a really bold choice. And that means that you really don't care about whether the new player gets involved with the story or not.
Alex is currently taking a break from World of Warcraft after becoming burned out from the game's daily quest mechanics. You see, it turns out that if you want to stay up to date with endgame content in the latest patch, you have to complete a bunch of quests every single day. Now, we're not talking about 1 or 2 little tasks either. Alex told us that these daily quests can take between 3 to 5 hours to complete, and in some cases are essential to seeing everything the game's latest expansion pack has to offer in terms of story content.
It's almost job-like. For me, it would be wake up, do work, log on to WoW, do the dailies. So the time to do the daily content would be from like 5:30 till 7:30, and then raid at 8. And you'd have to squeeze it in around your schedule, right? Most of the time, if somebody's playing World of Warcraft at the front line of progression, it would be right back, just grabbing food. They're gone for 5 minutes. They're back at their desk on their computer, eating their food while doing their dailies. That is an everyday thing. There's no going to the table for half an hour to sit and eat. It doesn't play to the person who has everyday commitments. Whereas it used to play to a person that had everyday commitments. If you wanted to raid, your raid time would be your raid time. Outside of that, there was no daily commitments. In Wrath of the Lich King, I didn't have to log on every day to do content to make sure I kept up with everybody else. All I had to do was log on, go to my 25-man raid, kill bosses, get loot, character progression.
From what you're telling me, it sounds like it doesn't matter what point we get up to. World of Warcraft's going to demand our time.
It's going to want more and more of your time on a daily basis. It will slowly start to suck more time.
This was the opposite of what we were hoping to hear. 3 hours of time-limited questing a day? That's what we had to look forward to at level 60? Sounds miserable. Still, WoW is a big game, right? Let's say we no longer care about raiding or any other endgame activities. What if we just want to see the story? Once we finish our business on Kultiris, we can go back and run through all that original content, right?
You can still access it, but you've got to get to max level first.
What?
Oh, what?
You've got to get to max level. Then you make a new character. Then when you make a new character, it asks you which expansion you want to level in. So let's say you make a new character and you go, okay, I want to level in the first expansion. So you'll go to the first expansion. You'll get given the first zone to go to. You'll go to that zone. You'll start doing some quests. But because the leveling system is so, let's make sure everybody gets to max level as fast as possible, you'll never finish a zone. You'll always be higher level than the zone before you get to the end of it. So once you've done that, you then rush to the next zone, You'll do about 5-6 zones and you'll be ready to go to the new current content. And it'll be like, well, actually, there was 22 zones for this expansion. Why? I'm done with it. I'm not even going to find out what happened with any of the story here. And the whole thing has been just absolutely gutted.
Oh, Christ. Okay, well, surely there's some good news in all this, right? I mean, would you recommend WoW to someone who's never played it before?
Yes and no. In my personal experience, one of the best games I've ever played. In my personal experience, it's one of the worst games I've ever played.
Yeah, that tracks. Connor, on the other hand, represents a very different type of WoW player. For starters, whereas Alex loves, maybe it's more fair to say, has a complicated relationship with endgame content, Connor is a collector.
One of the main reasons I would log in and play WoW is to build up a mount collection and a cool transmog outfit. In the game, you can go back to different sorts of content and grab like a cool shoulder pad, and you can then apply that to all of your armor sets. So if you go into like a capital city and retail WoW, you'll probably see a bunch of people decked out in flaming metal, like sick arcane robes and stuff. And that was kind of the appeal for me.
Not only that, but Connor prefers to play WoW Classic over the current retail version of the game. Shoot, WoW Classic. Look, we haven't mentioned Blizzard's spin-off version of the game up to this point because, well, honestly, we assumed it wasn't worth talking about. WoW Classic is sort of like a time machine. It offers players the opportunity to play a version of WoW as it existed a decade ago. In my mind, WoW Classic is a super niche offering that appeals only to those who played the game upon its original release. But for Connor, who started playing WoW in 2015, remember, Classic appeals to his collecting sensibilities in a way that retail just doesn't anymore.
Because it's an older version of WoW with less sort of content below, a lot of the cool cosmetics and sort of rewards you get feel a bit more impactful. It's more relaxing to me, and it's a sort of WoW experience I can play after work on the weekends with Yaz and have a good time with it.
So what did Connor think about our desire to see the game's story through from start to finish?
The story's wank, mate. It is now.
But it didn't used to be, is what I understand.
No, it didn't used to be, which is why Classic's a bit better.
Right, that was going to be my question. So, if that's the experience I want, should I be playing Classic?
I don't know. I feel like if you love narratives and like a winding story, like WoW in general is kind of tricky. It's better in the Classic, but it's not perfect because obviously, who's Arthas Menethil? I'm not 35 years old. I didn't play Warcraft 3. There's a lot of cool background info, and there are cool quest chains and cool characters. I think WoW does characters really well. But in terms of like sweeping narratives, you're not going to find it here. Just play Final Fantasy 14. A game that does that really well. Like, for real. It does a narrative really, really well.
Yeah.
Well, this is an unexpected realization. Maybe we should have been playing Classic this whole time. But it's not like Blizzard is advertising the game to new players in this way, right? So the question is, does Connor think that new players should try out the retail version?
For what it's worth, a new expansion is coming out. And that's the best time to play WoW. That's when you can make those stories happen because everyone's there and everyone's doing wild stuff, right? It does get a bit dry later on in expansions, but that's like anything, right? That's like the latest Fortnite season's kind of near the end, so people are kind of bored of that. So that's natural, right? But yeah, I would still recommend it to people.
Alright, so one thing we've established is that both Alex and Connor have played, collectively, an awful lot of World of Warcraft. But why? Why do they love and continue to love this game that they have some very real issues with?
I still love the game, even though I've got these thoughts about what it's like at endgame. And probably 80% of the people doing endgame content think the exact same, but they still play the game every day because it's World of Warcraft. That's what it does. That's how it keeps you. I've flown across Europe meeting people that I played World of Warcraft with, and I met my partner playing World of Warcraft. We played together for 13 years and got a flat together this year. So like, it's,
Wow.
it's
I
one of
wonder
those
it's special
stories.
to you. Do you think that if Liam and I, or any new player, kind of continued with WoW and got to endgame and did all this stuff, do you think that they could build the same memories over, as years go by, with the same kind of adoration or love that you have for your sort of past experiences with WoW?
I would hope so. There are key ingredients being obviously time and friends. You'll find what you're good at and you'll find what you like. And in doing that sort of content with people you like, given enough time, you will naturally come across there will be stuff you like doing that gives you this pumped up feeling, right? Retail WoW, even after all this time, still has the capability to provide some really amazing moments. I still believe that. Even if I'm a bit jaded, even if it's a bit like, oh god, I've put so much time into this bloody game.
We had a lot to think about following these conversations. That evening, Ed and I logged on for our third joint play session. I won't lie to you, I wasn't feeling optimistic. As insightful as our conversations with Alex and Connor had been, they had reinforced a worry I had been chewing over for a few days. What if the WoW everyone spoke about with such nostalgia was gone, and I was trying to fall in love with a lesser replica? Before Ed arrived, I accidentally warped myself to the Night Elf starter area by pressing this random button on my hotbar, and what I found there left me genuinely stunned. What was this colourful oasis I had stumbled upon? Is this where my adventure would have begun originally, in the vanilla version of WoW? Not on a boat, not shipwrecked on a tutorial island or stuck in some dreary docklands. Here, among the trees, the crystal clear lakes, the gleaming stone. I just quietly fished for a few moments, collecting my thoughts. I felt grief? Loss for something I had never had in the first place? I warped back to Stormwind and spent the next 30 minutes travelling between various locations around the world. All of these areas were bare bones and desolate in comparison to the more graphically advanced Kul Tiras. It was clear that these cities were developed over a decade ago, and yet they felt distinctly WoW in that specific way I had been craving since our journey began. Why couldn't I have found these locations naturally as my journey progressed? Why would WoW hide them away, almost as if it was ashamed of its glorious, beautiful past? Viewer, I snapped. I completely and utterly snapped. How did the game expect me to go and kill some trees on Piss It Down Island when all this was right here, beckoning me towards it, promising my dehydrated character a single sweet sip of refreshing adventure? I returned to Stormwind and accepted a fresh quest that whisked me away to yet another land. Immediately I was thrown into an invading force, liberating a flame-scorched beach from towering demonic monstrosities. And guess what? I was too high level for this area now, because I'd spent the last 10 hours killing whatever the hell these things are down a bloody mine. As Alex had mentioned earlier that day, all WoW seemed to care about was fast-tracking me to max level as smoothly and as quickly as possible. It all felt a bit like if your mum gave you a slice of delicious lemon drizzle cake, knowing full well you've already gorged yourself on a bowl of roast potatoes. I didn't know there was gonna be any cake at the end of this. I was hungry when I saw the potatoes, ravenous even, so of course I gorged. You told me to gorge. All I knew was gorging, and now I regret every single bite. I won't lie to you, this play session was about as entertaining as attending the funeral of a family pet. Perhaps you think I'm overreacting, but this pain felt personal. I'd invested time into this, and this was the realization I was having? We thought talking to Alex and Connor would re-energize us, fill us with a sense of purpose that pushed us beyond these early teething issues. But with the knowledge that thousands of hours awaited us, we had lost all desire to carry on. Did we seriously think we could see the most exciting parts of World of Warcraft in a matter of weeks? What a fool's errand. We had failed before we even began. Alright, maybe that whole reaction is a bit dramatic for two lads killing spiders in a video game. Besides, I wasn't done trying just yet. Do you remember what Ed had said to me during our first chat about his personal history with the game?
I just have so many fond memories of it. I'm just looking forward to being back, and I'm hoping that, in booting up the game and starting out in whatever we do, will bring back those same emotions. So I think really I just want, through this, I just want to kind of to recapture that feeling.
I hadn't stopped thinking about this for the entire duration of the project, and our conversation with Alex and Connor had only made me think about it more. It was clear that we weren't going to hit those original goals. Raids were hundreds of hours away at least. The campaign was a disjointed slog, and although hitting max level did seem possible considering the speed in which this game was throwing XP at us, neither of us wanted to put in the work to see it through. But the one consistent thing that was carrying us through all of this was the chats. The few hours a week we were spending catching up outside of work to talk about our days, what we had for dinner that night, and what we had planned for the weekend. Sometimes our conversations got a little deeper, sometimes they were silly and throwaway, but there was this connection shared over WoW, no matter how much we were focusing on the game itself. Ed mentioned that his personal goal, the thing he was aiming to achieve more than any of the other goals we had set for ourselves, was to relive what it was like to be a teenager playing World of Warcraft after school. Perhaps that, all along, was the goal we should have been aiming for. So I came up with one last plan. We didn't play WoW again for over a week. Warzone 2 was released a few days after our last play session, and the two of us wordlessly began to play that in our free time instead. WoW, we had decided, was impenetrable. A long road uphill to an empty summit. But we had made a commitment. We had booked one last play session into our calendars, and I was determined to make this one count. Now, Ed and I don't live near each other. Up here in Newcastle, I'm hundreds of miles away from my pal, forcing all of our communication to be carried out strictly via text and over Discord. How could we replicate the experience of two teenagers hanging out after school purely over the internet? Well, that morning, I asked Ed to do me a favour. I requested he go to his local supermarket and buy the necessary components for a classic British school kid tea. Ever a good sport, Ed agreed. That evening, before we logged onto WoW one last time, we were going to dine like kings. 14-year-old kings, admittedly, but kings nonetheless. Most kings were kids. This analogy works. That evening, I popped the oven on and began to construct my feast. I had settled on a quintessential dinner, a sumptuous main course of potato smiley faces and breaded turkey unicorns, which I opted for over dinosaurs because they were more fantasy-themed than their prehistoric counterparts. To wet my dries, I paired the dish with a single tin of Heinz baked beans. A rare vintage. After 30 minutes in the oven, my creation was complete. A slice of white bread and butter to garnish, a bottle of Arizona iced tea to wash it all down, and voila. Forced nostalgia, here we come. Ed went on a very similar culinary journey.
Hello, dear viewers. So here it is. My magnum opus. I don't know what the chef term is for that. Michelin star quality food here. So we got the serving of ketchup. We've got the southern fried chicken nuggets. I did look around for some animal shaped chicken-y things, but they didn't have any in my supermarket, so I just had to go for, that a slightly lesser choice. We've got the faces, the classics. Lightly browned, slightly cursed, especially this one looks slightly devilish. And then just a lot of beans, but it needs to swim in beans for it to really feel kind of throwback. And then we just got the class of of OJ as well, because that's a quintessential drink of the sort of old to modern age, whatever that means. So yeah, there we go.
Sat at my desk with a bowl full of beige, Ed and I ate our dinner and chatted about nothing in particular. For 30 minutes, two friends broke bread and shared stories. It was a genuinely wonderful way to spend an evening. After multiple sighs, we reluctantly ventured once more into Azeroth. There would be no spider killing this evening. No urchins would be liberated by the adventurers Sharald and Edders. Instead, we travelled home, to Stormwind, to revisit some familiar locations from Ed's childhood. We left Stormwind and headed out into the surrounding forests. Immediately, the tone of Ed's voice changed as nostalgia dissolved his exhaustion.
This is probably my favourite music in the game, this place, Elwyn Forest. It's just kind of how I remember WoW. I don't know, just how I sort of envisage WoW to be is here.
The next half hour was spent exploring these older, more basic environments that have been present in the game since its original launch. Quiet forests gave way to expansive lakes. Cresting a hill revealed a small town tucked away within the nook of a mountain.
Obviously, look, you crest this little hill and you're like, oh shit,
wow,
look, there's
look at
Lakeshire.
that. That was fun.
At every step down these once familiar paths, Ed would recall the name of an upcoming location. For the first time in weeks, it felt like I was finally able to see the game through the eyes of someone who once loved it. I could imagine spending hours killing wolves within these woods, venturing back to the safety of Stormwind to stock up on supplies before heading out into the wilds once again. Here was the spirit of adventure I had craved this whole time, and yet it was punctuated with the sad realization that it wasn't something I was ever going to experience for myself. Not here. Not now. Travelling further north, we found ourselves lost in a barren zone filled with dangerous enemies where the sky was stuck in a permanent, sinister sunset. As we fought off groups of identical lizard men, we conceded that we were finally done. It was over. Together, we sat down on a nearby hill and reflected on the journey we had been on over the last few weeks.
I'm getting attacked by a dog. Oh.
Well, that just sums it all up really, doesn't it? The aim of this experiment was to discover how much space World of Warcraft would take up in our daily lives. The answer, unsurprisingly, is complicated. As we travelled through Azeroth, it became clear that World of Warcraft wasn't for us. Not anymore. Casual newbies could find a home here, but it would require hundreds, if not thousands of hours of investment to reach that point. That's a lot to ask of someone who has responsibilities. It's a big expectation for a game that requires a monthly subscription to play. I wish World of Warcraft was for me. Unsurprisingly, Ed feels the same way too.
Genuinely, I feel a little bit downhearted about it. I know that sounds quite sad, but it just wasn't what I expected from WoW. Having that nostalgia for the game, and sort of being so excited to dive back in, and that being crushed fairly quickly, I would say.
But like the greatest of adventures, it wasn't the destination that mattered. It was the journey. If we've taken anything away from this experience, it's the understanding of how important this game is to those who have played it over the years. Both WoW Retail and Classic exist for its fans. Those like Alex and Connor are hoping that one day this ever-expanding behemoth will recapture a shred of its former glory. Their deep love for the game stems partly from nostalgia, but mainly from the people they shared this journey with. Their friends, their guilds, their communities. WoW is a game that facilitates conversation, friendship, quality time spent together. That was our favourite thing about it too. All we can do to celebrate what makes this game so special is to make our own memories within it, to look back and raise a glass to times gone by, to revere what came before, even if what remains isn't quite what we always hoped it would be. I want to leave you with one final thought. When editing this video, I asked Ed to recommend some tunes from the game's soundtrack to use as background music. He sent me a few links, which led me to discover a series of videos by YouTube user Everness, who creates these hour-long soundtrack compilations themed around locations within WoW. Layered with relevant ambient sound effects, these videos are beautifully put together and capture the essence of these non-existent places so powerfully that even I found myself feeling nostalgic, despite never having visited them within the game. But the comments are what makes these videos truly special. Scroll down even slightly, and you'll uncover a treasure trove of personal anecdotes left behind by hundreds of WoW fans. These are stories about family, friends, love, loss, but most of all, there's this sense of appreciation for the game, for its music, but most of all, for its players. World of Warcraft isn't for us, but for the millions who have played it at some point over the last 18 years, it's something so much more. Thank you so much for watching this first episode of Inventory Space. This project has been a huge task for me and Ed, and I'm so happy that it's finally out in the world for you to enjoy. I'd love to know two things from you if you've watched this far. First of all, I'd like to know if you've played World of Warcraft, or if this video has convinced you to jump in and see if it's for you. I'd also like to know what games you would like us to cover as part of this series. Are there any huge games that you want to get into but don't know how impenetrable they'll be? Let us know down there in the comments. For all your PC gaming needs, make sure to check out rockpapershotgun.com, and we'll be back with another episode of Inventory Space very soon.